The last few years have been crazy for the car market, but despite the fact that we're 5 years removed from the pandemic, which was really whenever all of this car market mess started, we are still in a very, very bad position. And while I know I make a lot of videos about price fluctuations, tariffs, dealership inventory, and discounts in the state of the automotive market on a month-by-month basis, in this video, I'm going to break down why I think the car market is still in a really lofty position and why I think ultimately things will get much worse before they get better. According to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, auto loan debt currently sits at $1.64 trillion nationwide, which oddly enough, for the first time in the history of this YouTube channel, is not at all-time highs. Because despite the fact that I'm sitting here making a video talking about how auto loan debt is out of control, auto loan debt actually increased last quarter by $13 billion, which is the first time since Q2 of 2011 that auto loan debt decreased from one quarter to the other. Now, the reason why car debt has gotten out of control largely has to do with the fact that car prices have increased, with the average new vehicle transaction price going from $38,948 in December of 2019 to $48,699 in April of 2025, which is a staggering 25% increase. And there are a few reasons why this price increase has happened. But before we dive into that, now, as much as I hate the car market and what car prices have become, the fact of the matter is cars are a necessary part of our day-to-day lives. And it's not a matter of avoiding purchasing a car altogether, but instead being an educated buyer. That's why I use CarEdge, the sponsor of this video. Now, if you've ever purchased a car, then you know how confusing it can get. Dealers throw around numbers, fees, special discounts, and it's hard to tell what's real. The truth, they're negotiating from a position of power because they know the numbers and you don't. But CarEdge gives you that power back. They show you the actual dealer invoice price, not the inflated MSRP, but what the dealer paid for the car. This one tool alone can save you thousands, because once you know the invoice price, you're not just guessing at a fair price, you're anchoring your data to actual leverage. And you walk in with that leverage. Just go to caredge.com/Aubrey, plug in the make and model that you're looking for, and instantly see what the dealership really paid. Most people walk into a dealership hoping to get a deal, but the truth is, if you don't know the invoice price, you're negotiating blind. That's how people overpay by thousands without even realizing it. Go to caredge.com/Aubrey and avoid costly mistakes when buying a car. When car prices started to skyrocket in 2020 and in 2021, automakers wanted you to believe that it was simply due to supply and demand issues. But that's not exactly true, because even as inventory has climbed to nearly 2.5 million units as of last month, which is down from its inventory highs in November of 2024, but way up from its inventory lows, car prices have still continued to go up, despite the fact that inventory is very literally stacking up. In fact, between the lowest inventory of 2021 and the highest inventory of 2024, car prices have seen an increase of 11% despite the fact that inventory has more than tripled. And in reality, the reason why car prices have gone up and stayed up has nothing to do with supply and demand, but really has to do with two things. The first is that automakers have simply gotten rid of their lower-priced cars. This has in turn skewed the average up of what people pay for a vehicle. With some of the most affordable cars in the market, from the Toyota Yaris, Honda Fit, the Chevy Cruze, Chevy Spark, and more, getting the axe in favor of higher-end models. But in addition to this, automakers are just raising prices as well. Now, it is important to note that part of this increase is due to inflation. For example, the 2019 4Runner SR5 started at $35,310, but the 2024 model started at $40,455, which was an increase of 15%. But whenever we take into account inflation, the 2024 model SR5 is actually cheaper than the 2019 SR5. And the reason why I think the 4Runner is a good example, specifically 2019 to 2024, is because during this period of time, car prices went up, in many cases more than 15%. But in the case of the 4Runner, these two cars are nearly identical, despite the fact that there is a 6-year age gap between the 2 years. But a different example under the same Toyota umbrella that gives a very different viewpoint is the 2025 Toyota 4Runner TRD Pro. And I think that this vehicle specifically is a great example of how car prices have increased far above what inflation really dictates. And in the case of Toyota, they have used the refresh 6th generation model as an opportunity to increase prices significantly. Because the 2019 TRD Pro started at $42,960, while the 2025 model starts at $68,350. This is a staggering 59% increase and far higher than what inflation would dictate, which would place the $52,960 Forerunner in 2019 to $54,750 today. This is just one example, but there are dozens of them across the entire car market of cars that have increased in price a significant amount between pre-pandemic and today, and that increase is far above what accounts for inflation. But truthfully, the problem here isn't only the fact that automakers are increasing pricing, it's also the fact that dealerships are also charging more. In fact, last week I published a video where I broke down inventory levels at some of the highest inventory automakers, and Mitsubishi, an automaker with falling demand and stacking inventory, is charging a $1,500 dealer markup, which to me is truly the most perfect example of how dealerships have just simply gone too far in what they're doing, and they are absolutely taking advantage of the position that they're in. Because while Mitsubishi is a really egregious example, given the fact that they're charging a markup whenever they literally have the second highest inventory of any other automaker, and they're in general a brand that nobody really wants to buy, they are certainly not the only automaker charging dealer markups, and brands from Toyota, Ford, Chevy, and more are also doing the same thing. So despite the fact that inventory has absolutely returned to pre-pandemic levels and in some case exceeded it, we are still seeing these dealership markups across the board, even with brands that definitely do not have a supply and demand issue. And with Trump's new auto tariff policy, unless something changes, car prices aren't going to go down anytime soon. In fact, they're going to go up, with some experts believing that car prices will go up another 10 to 15% as a direct result of these tariffs, causing people to take out loads more debt that quite frankly they can't afford. Something we can conclude based on the fact that auto loan terms are rising, meaning people are having to stretch their payment out in order to afford or justify them, with the 84-month loan term becoming the new norm, and the $1,000 car note becoming more common as well, and where I predict that this problem is going to come to a head really is twofold. First is the fact that people just really can't afford these car loans. Debt delinquencies, not just with car loans, but amongst a wide variety of debts, have hit the highest levels that we've seen since 2008, with people falling behind on credit cards, car loans, and even mortgages slowly beginning to tick up. But on the other side of the coin, I think that what we're seeing here play out, or I think that what we will begin to see play out, is something similar to what we saw with the housing crash in 2008, though obviously not to the same extent. In 2008, the housing crisis was caused, in short, by people who got home loans that really shouldn't have. They got loans they couldn't afford, they defaulted, foreclosed homes flooded the market, and as a result, housing prices went down because there was a ton of inventory, which then affected anyone who wanted to sell their home, because if you wanted to sell your home in 2008, well, there's a good chance that you wouldn't be able to sell it for as much as you owed, sort of locking people in this position to where they weren't able to sell their home even if they couldn't afford it. This in turn led to more foreclosures, which caused the crash. The same thing is currently happening, and I predict that it will continue to happen in the car market, and I really don't know why more people aren't talking about this. Over the past 5 years, people have purchased cars that they simply can't afford, and they bought these cars at an inflated above MSRP price. And these same new car buyers who purchased cars over the last few years are now screwed because their cars are not worth nearly as much as they were whenever they purchased them, or nearly as much to how much they owe. I think Tesla is a glaring example of this because the company slashed their prices overnight, leaving car owners with 5 figures of negative equity that they have no way to get out of. Another good example are cars purchased during the pandemic. During the pandemic, car prices went up, not just from an MSRP perspective, but many car buyers were paying above MSRP. These cars are now not only seeing your standard depreciation, but you kind of started from a deficit because of the fact that these car buyers overpaid for their car to begin with, thus sending these buyers into even more negative equity. In fact, according to a report from our friends over at CarEdge, as of Q4 of last year, 39% of financed vehicle owners have negative equity in their car, and 54% of EV owners have negative equity as well. A different study showed that 24.9% of trade-ins during the same period of time had negative equity, so approximately 1 in every 4 trade-ins were underwater, whereas the previous year only 1 in 5 were underwater. And with the 84-month car loan becoming more and more common, this number will no doubt increase. And this puts car owners into a really tough spot because not only can they not afford the car loan that they're in and the car payment that they have to make, but they also can't get out of the car loan because they owe more than what the car's worth. Sure, there are ways to get out of negative equity, like rolling it into a different vehicle, which I would argue is probably your worst case scenario, getting a lease and trying to offset the payments that way, or even taking out a personal loan. But let's be real, none of these situations or solutions are ideal. Now, when it comes to negative equity and car buyers who have negative equity, believe it or not, tariffs could potentially offer some reprieve, because as new cars become more expensive, car buyers may turn to the used car market as a result, which then could warrant car prices to go up in the used car market, and these people who have negative equity may be able to recoup some of the amount that they owed through those inflated prices. But long term, this doesn't solve any of our problems. In fact, it makes our long term problems worse because it sort of repeats what we've already been going through. Because similar to what we saw in 2021 and 2022, people may buy a car and pay an inflated price because of tariffs, but then whenever tariffs get reversed, which I think is something that will happen, it's just a matter of when, these prices may go down, at which point people are left with more negative equity again. The bottom line is, this situation isn't good. The median income in the United States is about $61,000, give or take a few hundred, depending on the source. And the average new car in the US is $48,699, which equates to 80% of the annual income. And spending that much on a car and having that big of a monthly payment, on top of the normal debts and payments that people are making on a month-by-month basis, it is simply unsustainable. And I strongly predict that this will get worse before it gets better because as we sit here today, there is absolutely no indication pointing to the fact that automakers are looking to lower prices. But just because car prices go up doesn't mean you have to pay more. And again, you can use the sponsor of this video, CarEdge, by going to the website caredge.com/Aubrey to learn more about invoice pricing and to ensure that you get the best deal possible. Like always, you guys, if you have any questions, comments, if you have anything to add, I would love to hear it. So make sure to leave a comment down below. And while you guys are at it, make sure to hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit the notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.